Who would be a Wolves fan, eh?
Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, whenever you're listening to this wonderful podcast. Welcome to the latest in game week 4 Wolves Fancast preview show, Newcastle versus Wolves, in association with the Sports Social Podcast Network, FC Quiz.app, and Boston Coffee and Vending Company. And I'm your host tonight, Jafar, being joined tonight by Rich Hobbs, fresh from, what was it? A success at last weekend. Really, it was an improvement on last year's result at the charity football event for Wolves Foundation. We'll start with that, Rich. How was that as an experience? I know you've taken part in it before, but it's always good to do something for a fantastic cause, isn't it?
I completely, and as you alluded to, every year we seem to keep going one step further. Obviously, it's a good chance to catch up with everyone in person, and realise that you're not as young as you used to be, I guess. But I think for obviously raising money for a fantastic cause in Wolves Foundation's the most important bit, but it was quite cool in a way that because we've played in the tournament a couple of years now, we've done things like the matchup Molyneux together as well. And we've been doing a podcast for a number of years. It felt like for the first couple of games that we were winning because we just knew each other that bit more. And, I think the lads at WCRFM, who were a lot younger than us, quite skillful, just didn't have that little bit of experience like us old heads. But when it got through to the knockout stages, and the length of the game increased, which was an interesting step. So it was 15-minute games. So you had 5 group games, and then the knockout games were 20-minute games, so in 10 minutes each way. So definitely in the second half of the quarterfinal, the drop off in intensity was noticeable, and we'd very much hit our destination. I think in the semi-final when we conceded with inside 17 seconds. And it turned out that the Wolves media team, who we played against, had seemingly contracted Ruben Neves to play for them because one of their players scored 2, potentially 3, just absolute bangers. And in those little goals, it's quite hard to score good goals, but no, we got to adjust position as well. And, it's good to see some of the other content creators as well. We all give each other a bit of stick now and again online for different things. And obviously the likes of Gully, who's been on the Fancast before, does stuff with Talking Wolves now. So it's good to kind of, catch up with these people in real life, I guess. So, and I'm now finally being able to feel my legs again, enough to do walking football with Luke at least today.
Yeah, I saw that on social media. I think that's a great little cause, and getting local clubs, especially like Oldbury, I know Luke involved and his father there, getting involved with local businesses and sort of bringing things together. I think that's the main achievement of anything that we try to do and be involved in is to try and bring community back into football and bring groups together. Looking at the weekend though, it seems weird because to have an international break so early, it always freaks me out a little bit. But we've had it. It's been and gone. England did very, very well against Serbia. Fantastic result out in Belgrade. But we're back in the Premier League. Wolves had this very poor start to the season. They really struggled in the opening fixtures. The 4-0 to Man City, the 1-0 to Bournemouth, and the 3-2 at home at Everton, sort of giving us a little bit of a lift and hope. It's left us with a poor start, but do you feel like this game's sort of a chance for us to start the season as sort of being a ground zero?
You've got to hope so. I think having the international break early kind of doesn't help things, but also it coming straight after a transfer window closing as well. I think it means that we've brought players in and then ultimately not be able to see them play for effectively 2 weeks. So you've got the likes of Krejci, you've got the likes of Tolu, who you are basically coming in fresh. And they won't have had the chance to have, let's say, done the training and kind of re-gel with the teammates. So it must be a bit difficult for not just Wolves, Newcastle in the same position with some of their signings, because they made signings very late on in the window as well. You've just got to hope that Wolves can prey on some of that. And obviously things that Newcastle haven't been quite right this season as well, with the Alexander Isak saga. And although you could argue the club were right, it still kind of left a bit of a cloud over the club. Whereas when you kind of, I guess, the trickle down of Strand Larsen, let's say, it didn't necessarily have as big an impact. And it's hard to tell how situations like that will impact a football team. Eddie Howe might have gotten really geared up to squash any doubt, any negativity, and really come out with traps firing. And I think Wolves need to be wary of that and really need to be on their game. And hopefully, if they do catch a sense that Newcastle aren't quite with it and haven't quite gelled with some of their new forward players, that ultimately the likes of Strand Larsen, if he's fit, can really trouble them early on. And, I'd like to think that we can potentially get something out of the game.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, it feels like a chance for some of these new guys to come in. And one of those guys I really want to talk about is sort of, again, a lad you've already mentioned, is Ladislav Krejci. And Wolves' defence has been a major concern this season. And the conceding of 8 goals in the first 3 games, in particular, it's been exposed as a liability in terms of way that we play in football. Agbadu's not looked as good as he did last season. Toti Gomez, the red card that he got against Bournemouth was not very becoming of a captain. Is that the captain's arm anchor? Santi Bueno, I thought, did quite well against Everton when he played. And Matt Doherty is obviously filling in. Can Ladislav come in and be someone who can help shore up the defence, a lot like Emmanuel Agbadou did when he came in the January transfer window? That it is sort of a new face, a new head, someone who's calm and collected and helps us sort of relax the game down. And the other point is, as Neil White says in the comments, will he actually play?
I think it's when we signed him, the big question mark is, where's he going to play? Ultimately, Agbadou, although he has been off form this season, it has been a standout in a Wolves shirt this calendar year. And it would feel harsh in a way to drop him after a couple of just poor games. Toti Gomez, they made captain, so he's kind of undroppable. Unless he really, really puts in some stinkers, and although his performances haven't been amazing, and the other option is either Matt Doherty coming out of the side, which Krejci seems to be more of a left-sided defender, but we've seen it work before with the likes of Kilman playing on as an inverted, or definitely sort of a left-footed on the right type thing. Which might open up some interesting passing angles if you go down the tactico route. And I don't know whether it's something that's been kind of drip-fed through the media or something that Pereira said himself, but the idea of him playing in midfield has been touted as well. And potentially, I'm not necessarily against that either, to be honest, in terms of having someone who will give us a little bit more of a defensive shield in front of the back line as opposed to within it. I don't know where he's immediately going to step in. Personally, in the cold light of day, I'd probably put him at left centre half next to Agbadou, and still probably keep Doc. But I think it depends on how adept Krejci will be in the Premier League, because if not, I'd say maybe try him on the right. It might give him an interesting role, and keep Gomez because he's your captain. How about you, Jafo? Where do you sort of see him slotting in ultimately? Because it's a bit of a question mark, because a lot of people rate him, or at least he's got a potential at the very least.
Yeah, I think the biggest issue I think you've already covered is sort of where he will play in that back line, and I think the Kilman idea of where he was when he played on that weaker side, as it were, is going to be the only logical option because of the point that you've already covered. Toti Gomez is the captain essentially of this team. And you don't drop your captain, essentially put the armband on them that they're going to play 35 plus games a season without injury and suspension. We're a little bit sort of stuck in a catch-22 situation with Krejci and how he plays within this side. I think the idea of playing him in midfield as a third option to Gomez and Andre is probably not the right way of thinking, because he'd only really done that in the Czech league when he was at Sparta. He'd never done that for Girona, so he's going to have to play centre half.
Yeah, and I think if he just play midfield, he's ultimately going to be very much just a destroyer.
Mm-hmm.
However, technically good on ball, I think it is going to be playing a centre half in centre midfield. I mean, I was going to say, I've seen the YouTube comments. Certivita Breeder saying Krejci in the centre, Ag on the right, Toti on the left. Which again, potentially I see it might relieve a bit of pressure off Agbadou.
Yeah, I think possibly. I mean, you could see, because of obviously all three centre backs there are very, very good passing ranges. And each of them could step into the midfield and sort of be that third man, allowing Joao Gomez to push up a little bit and engage higher up the pitch in terms of being in between, whether it be John Arias, Fer Lopez, Marshall Monetzi, or Jean-Ric Nabelago. Sort of help them in attacks, because I think we need to get more bodies going forward, and I think that link between midfield and attack has been one of our major issues this season, and I think it's kind of forced us to play in sort of a defensive style, so we are playing more counter-attacking, and that's kind of like to answer the question from Shane on Twitter about going for that low block counter. I think we've kind of like we've forced ourselves into that because we don't have history with playing like a very controlled way of playing. Personally, I would prefer to see John Arias come into sort of a more central position, or Fer Lopez, because Fer Lopez, if anyone who's not seen Spain under 21s, he was incredible for them. He got a very good assist, and the game previous, he basically made the pass, which came before the assist as well for one of the goals, and he looked very, very good. So it's depending on how Vitor sees the setup. We saw in some of the games where he's gone with the two strikers that we have looked a little bit more creative and a little bit more fluid in the way that we attack in the goal, which is probably where I would like to see us going forward.
Yeah, I think it. I know at the end of pre-season we tried with Arias on the left and Lopez on the right, and I'd be quite interested to see him do that again, because ultimately both are quite inverted and like to drift inside as well. And you could almost see a mini box forming of Andre Gomez, Lopez, and Arias quite centrally tucked, and giving those wing backs, I guess, question marks on who starts at either wing back, I guess, a lot more space to really operate. Or we try and go for two up front, and either Lopez or Arias starts behind. I think Arias looked his best in a Wolves top in that half an hour spell against West Ham when he played as almost a classic number 10. And I'd like to see Wolves be that little bit more adventurous, because ultimately, if we're playing a back three or back five, just on a numbers game, you kind of conceding potential possession because you don't have another player in midfield or attack. But if we've got an extra player if we're able to get our creative players on the ball in more dangerous areas, then that's hopefully going to counteract it a little bit more. And, we like to play counter-attack, direct football when we need to. And we're not necessarily a side built to have 75% possession. But I think against Newcastle, they are a physical team. They are a big team. And we need to make sure we've got numbers in the middle of the park. I think it's going right down the spine of the team.
Yeah, 100%. With that being said, I mean, it's not going to look for good reading because this is just a predicted lineup, and I think there will be some changes. But looking at possible lineups, this is just going off what was last out for those watching on YouTube for Newcastle and for Wolves. The bit that worries me is that Jorgen Strand Larsen, he didn't get a lot of minutes for Norway. He did get some, but he's still a doubt, and that's a big problem. And Hugo Bueno is a doubt as well. And I think he kind of changed a lot of people's opinions of him against Everton, Rich. I think he came on did very, very well. But now there is sort of a rivalry between him and David Muller-Wolf, who did quite well for Norway in the international break. He got an assist. Granted, it was to Erling Haaland, who is the goal-scoring monster, so he makes anyone look good playing with him. But how do you see us lining up? I mean, Jackson Chachua is going to come back in over Rodrigo Gomez. That's a given. But looking at that, where do you see Vitor looking at the weekend for a lineup? I
mean, I think if Strand Larsen's got an hour in him, you start Strand Larsen. Would be my the drop off from Hwang, from Larsen to Hwang is big in that dynamic. I mean, we could probably talk all day about Manetzi. I know there's a few stats going around on Twitter I saw about how often he runs into the box and how little he actually gets the ball, and how little impact he actually has on the team. I mean, even when you kind of look at it on paper, it just feels like they're a bit of square pegs in round holes. Ultimately, for me, I say Strand Larsen, I'd start. I don't know where Tolu sits in the depth chart, to coin an awful American term, I guess, but I think there's probably more similarities with Strand Larsen in terms of being a big focal point. And I think for some of those Wolves players, in the likes of Arias, Gomez and Andre in particular, having a central anchor up front, I think there's actually quite a lot in that for those players to manoeuvre around ultimately. In terms of your left back, I mean, I don't know after watching both of them. I mean, Bueno came on and did well. I say arguably should have had a penalty. If you ask, apparently it's been decreed now that Wolves should have had a penalty for the foul on Bueno. I think with Wolf, first and foremost, I think there is those kind of settling in pains, and there is you're seeing him on a steep learning curve, but ultimately it's one that kind of a lot of players have to go through. We forget the likes of Aït-Nouri. He had an amazing debut for Wolves, but we did have quite a spell of him not quite having the output that was really needed in the Wolves shirt. I think ultimately, and it sounds really bad, but neither of them are really, really good. It's where your kind of comparison point is, because if our comparison points to Aït-Nouri, then they are both far short of it. But I think they can both do a job. It's just, I think, having some of those other players around them to help him out, whereas Nori helped out Toti Gomez in terms of giving him that release and allowing him to focus on the better parts of his game. Whereas, because we don't have that, actually, we need the likes of Gomez to be able to support the wing back further, and giving them that bit of a cushion, and we're kind of not quite in a position for that across a number of areas of the pitch ultimately.
Yeah, no, I agree. And the one big battle, I know we've talked about Newcastle's thighs, and I think good news for Wolves is Joe Linton's probably not going to play. And I think Joe Linton and Bruno Guimaraes together are two of the scariest mother effers in the Premier League as a midfield partnership. And I think Joe Gomez and Andre versus Guimaraes and Tonali is a little bit fairer. And I think that's probably good. My concern with Newcastle is Johan Vissat is a very, very good player. He could come in on that left-hand side for them. And we could be looking at Johan Vissat, Elanga, and Nicolas Voltemade, who, if people haven't seen Voltemade, he's a very, very, very technical player. We're talking about someone who's the same height as Jorgen Strand-Larsen around about, with some antics, but he can dribble like any other player the best on the planet. So it's going to be really interesting to see where they start in terms of because they've done a lot of transfers. I don't see any real shocks for us. I think Arakadara, LB, or Tolo, whatever you want to call him, I think he'll be on the bench. I can't see him coming in. He's not got massive amounts of minutes away while he was on international duty. And I think when it comes down to Vitor Pereira, I think there's a sense of safety, and I think we haven't really seen him push the boat out with a lot of the selections and lineups this season. I think the first game against Man City was really, really safe. We saw Menezes and Jean-Ric Bellegarde play when we'd bought in Fair Lopez and Arias, and we were surprised at this. And I think Vitor Pereira is sort of playing his cards very close to his chest and playing very safe hands at the moment, and that might become more of an issue down the road. But currently, I think we just need to get points on the board, and that's the biggest worry for most fans at the moment is when we get rid of that 0, and that worries. I know it worries a lot of fans, but it especially worries me at the moment. And Wolves in recent years, I mean, they've not travelled particularly too well, Rich. I mean, they've got. With the graphic, I'm including friendly games in it, but it's still, the point still stands is that Wolves do not travel well. In the last, they've had a win in 5 away games, and they always struggle against Newcastle, losing 4 of the last 5 encounters and conceded 12. Additionally, all 9 Premier League meetings between the two sides at St James's Park have seen both teams score. So at least we might get a goal, but a clean sheet seems out of the window yet again.
Yeah, I think it is an area for concern, isn't it? And the fact that it's kind of stemming across campaigns now. Even the Brighton game, we never looked like winning. Bournemouth, sorry. I think Wolves have got a real job on their hands, and it's frustrating because I think that this game could be winnable for a different opponent. But my kind of confidence that I had pre-Everton has very quickly sapped away. But, maybe with Strand-Larsen in there, it's just going to give him that bit more to think about. Going back to, I guess, for lineups, and I think a lot of it does come down to how brave Pereira's going to be in terms of, do you keep someone as tricky and skillful as Arias in the lineup, as opposed to, Bellegarde, who will probably play a bit more centrally, a bit more in the middle of the park. But, on paper, if you're going to target an area for against Newcastle, it would probably be their right-hand side defensively. And it'll be really cool to sort of see Wolves ultimately take the game to Newcastle with that bit more, almost what we saw against what we saw against Man City, up until we just ran out of legs against a better team than us. But really try and put them under some pressure, and the atmosphere around Newcastle, as I alluded to earlier, it's probably better now that Isak's gone, but you don't quite know the impact of that, what that team's going to feel. And if Wolves can frustrate them and try and get a goal, I think it'll be interesting to sort of see how Newcastle respond. And ultimately, Wolves need to showcase they've got a resilient side, which they've not really shown in a while now.
Yeah, and we're struggling to sort of come up with positive thoughts and positive predictions for this game. But there has been, I think, sort of one positive impact from one of the new signings, and that's Jackson Chachua. And he's a very, very interesting character. He's very, very fast. He offers us this sort of pure pace that we need on the counter when we're playing that sort of style of football. Do you think that the sort of raw speed that he does have will be a game changer for Wolves in certain games? And could this be one of those matches?
Yes. I mean, we've seen what Dan Burns was like against Adama Traore in a Wolves shirt, in his pomp. And I think it does give Wolves a real outlet. I think as I alluded to earlier, it depends how brave they're feeling to actually, for someone like Jackson to really push on that extra 10 yards and gamble in the open space if Wolves are having a counter-attack. And, Newcastle obviously like to break as well when they can do. But I think particularly as Wolf and Bueno aren't particularly quick either, that's not what their games are based around. I think having a player on the other side who can do a lot of his work off the ball supplements his team really nicely, and potentially gives us that outlet to really stretch a defence, whether it's on the break, but it's is then making sure that whoever's in front of him is giving him an option as well, which goes back to what we're saying about Menetzi, that's not really where you want Menetzi playing on the right side of a free, however much he kind of shifts around. Actually having a more central player and potentially someone like a more attacking minded player, or even someone who can ultimately get the ball out to him, someone like Fer Lopez, who's shown he is creative, who's shown he's got a level of vision to his game that Menetzi ultimately doesn't have. I'm excited to see what he can do in a Wolves shirt. And I think he's got the makings to be a real fan favourite and a bit of a cult player.
I think so. I think I hate to use comparisons to the past, but you look at when you had Mel Kamara, who's incredibly fast footballer. I'm not saying that they're even in the same ballpark, because Mo was fun and he was great, but he's never at that level. But as you say, when they do these special little moments and sort of when you're sort of at the edge of your seat and you're not quite sure and you can enjoy it, that's what's special about being a Wolves fan. Looking at what you're saying, actually, I was thinking about it, and I was thinking sort of about on the fly about what Sativa was saying in the comments earlier, about Krejci playing in the middle, and I could see potentially similar to what we used to do last season when Totti Gomez used to shift out to that left back position, and it sort of played back forward when we were in possession. The Agbadu could go out to that right back position, and you could have Krejci and Totti Gomez, and then David Muller, Wolf or Bueno sort of sitting as that back four, and then Jackson gets that sort of freedom to go up and down as he pleases, and then Menetzi or whoever's there on that right hand side can kind of come more centrally and play a little bit more compact. I think that's a possibility. Also, to address a couple of the other comments about Newcastle running their team around, they're changing their team around. Sorry, I mean they have bought in. Let's not forget they've bought in Vissa, they bought in Baltimore, they bought in a lot of players. So they might change it around, but it's still going to be a very good, very, very good side, no matter what. And they've got some very, very good players in there, like Livramento and stuff, who can play every game. It's not a problem. What I normally also do, Rich, on the previews, is sort of talk about what is your take for the game. So, what would be a hot take for the game? Out there prediction, really, really grabbing at straws. Real strange one.
Hot take from Richard Hobbs. Gosh, I think would it be a hot take to say Wolves will win?
Yeah, I think,
that's bad, isn't it? That's the state of affairs, isn't it? But I think a hot take is me thinking we might do well. No, I think that my hot take will be I think Wolves will play aggressive in terms of trying to get the ball, playing with the right level of intensity. I think that's the thing we've ultimately been missing recently. I think we'll come out really hard against them and make it make it a really exciting game ultimately.
Yeah, I for some reason you reminded me of a Philip Senderos meme from many years ago when you said "come hard at them." I've no idea if you remember.
I know the meme.
Yes, my head went straight to it. I have no idea why. Yeah, that's. I think that may have even been BT Sport days, but incredible. As always, we've got a full Premier League weekend over Saturday and Sunday this weekend. Some very, very good games in there, Rich. I mean, obviously, we're interested in the one at 3:00 on Saturday at St James's Park. But what other games are you looking at, and where do you think there might be some either very good games or there might be some upsets this weekend?
I mean, the former Spurs manager taking on Arsenal in his first game in Anne Postecoglou and Forest, I think, is an interesting one. I mean, I've spoken previously about what I think might happen to Forest this season in terms of just going nuclear and imploding. And genuinely, I think I said about 2 weeks ago, towards the end of August, that I still thought that there was a chance that Gibbs White would still go despite the contract / hostage video that was posted. It's a bit of a style difference going from Nuno being very structured, counter-attack, to Ange ball. So there's a recipe for disaster if they're not careful. And that one looks interesting to me. Everton Aston Villa always strikes me as like a proper Premier League game. I think because both of them are somewhat stalwarts for Premier League, neither fully amounting to anything truly great in the league. But obviously Everton are on a bit of a wave at the moment. Villa very much aren't. So I think that one's quite. I think that one might be quite an entertaining game for me. I think I can see that one being quite a high scoring one. You got the Manchester derby to kind of round off the weekend, and it's a little bit like, okay, well, Man United, that could be the game, but they could sack Amorim afterwards. It could be, another shot across the bows for Guardiola after their kind of really impressive start to the season against us, and then have struggled since. There's a few hasty games across the weekend. You look at some of the 3 p.m. Saturday ones. I think if I was a neutral, and you were going to have to watch one of those, I think Bournemouth Brighton's probably quite a good game to watch. out of a lot of them, because even you've got the West Ham, West Ham Spurs derby, but West Ham are fucking awful. Like you wouldn't. Would you really want to watch that necessarily? So I think there's a couple of interesting ones across the three. Actually, all the 3 p.m. games I think would have a decent level of value in them.
Yeah, I think so. And I think the only way you'd want to watch West Ham is if you really, really like Schadenfreude.
Yeah.
While I've got those up on there, there's been a couple of little takes that have come out in the last hour. I mean, from another podcast. I'm not. I won't mention names, but Nathan Jude is on it. Yeah. But a couple of things have come out. Uche obviously went to Crystal Palace. It's been reported that he actually went to Crystal Palace on less money than Wolves offered, because Wolves treated him with so little respect over the fact that Mendes was involved in the deal and wanted a big cut and all that he actually went to Crystal Palace on less money, which I think is ridiculous. Is it not, Rich?
It's mad. It's so mad. Because ultimately in football, money talks, and Palace are obviously in a good place at the moment as a club in terms of FA Cup winners in Europe, even if it's not the stage that they were hoping for. But ultimately, if you've got a team who's offering you 5% more, you tend to go there. So it's a bit bonkers that Wolves have struggled with a negotiation so much, and it was something I was thinking earlier, actually, in terms of they are not the most important people in a football club, but you do actually need to be very skilled to be a football executive and to deal with transfers. And it's not just a case of firing off an email saying, "Dear Mr. So and So, I would like to purchase Uche off you for £10 million. Please, I look forward to hearing your reply." Actually, there's a genuine skill in these transactions, and I think Wolves, when you've sort of seen like the Ask Wolves series that they've done, and they've had people like Matt Jackson, and people who are able to, and probably Matt Hobbs to a degree as well, I imagine, who know how to sell a club and know how to, what you need to do to entice a player to buy into a project ultimately, because otherwise stuff like this happens. If you're not on the Mendes gravy train, then why would you put up with the drama? Why would you want someone getting involved and taking a slice of a pie when ultimately what's his involvement? He's not working. Mendes isn't officially working for the club. He's not the player's agent. You can see how it could cause a bit of disruption if you're not careful, and if you don't have the people the right people behind the scenes at Wolves to smooth stuff like that over, you're going to lose decent players to, unfortunately, better teams than us at the moment.
Yeah, and I think it's worrying that Tete has come in and done such a poor job in that respect. I mean, the other bits of news that came out was Krejci was actually offered to another La Liga club for half the price that Wolves paid, but said no, which is really quite worrying. And Wolves also went after Lammers, who's gone to Man United very early on in the window, which is strange that you go after a goalkeeper so early and then not really repeat it.
It's for Gaudier has always been, I think the Gaudier situation at Wolves is a funny one. I can see why they went in for someone, but I think it would have been contingent on how many of our goalies you could move on.
Yeah, of course.
And maybe they made an inquiry and then thought, actually, you know what, Sarr hasn't really matched his levels that he did in his first season in the Wolves top, but he's not that awful a goalkeeper in the grand scheme of things. And there's a although we are kind of running out of players in the first 11 who need replacing before him, that actually it's still not the most dying need to bring in a new goalkeeper, in my opinion. I don't think, I'd rather, well, we need to see how good these new players are, don't we, first? But, my kind of prevailing thought was, if we needed a new starter, it needed to be a new defender rather than we need a new goalkeeper. But I think it's interesting seeing the club are still keeping half an eye on it. So, the rumours of Sarr going to Saudi Arabia still haven't gone away 2 seasons later. So you never know that this might be his final season in a Wolves shirt, and I don't see it out of the realms of possibility personally.
No, and I think he's pushing the older echelons of a goalkeeper. He's over 30 now. He's one of the older members of this squad. So it would be prior planning, and it would be nice to see Wolves do something proactive instead of reactive again. We've saw it a couple of times. It's not really worked out in the past, but we have seen them try. The other bit that come out that I've been told is that Strand Larsen's on £75,000 a week here. He was offered 110k a week at Newcastle, and obviously that terms were agreed. That all came of that bit. And he met with Jeff at Compton. He asked to leave, but he didn't go on strike. And the cracker, as always, is Jorge Mendes encouraged Newcastle at every avenue that the deal was possible. So I don't know who the fuck. I'm swearing again already. It took 41 minutes for it to happen, but Mendes, I don't know who he's talking to within the club that would allow that to happen, but he's basically prostituting out and being a pimp for JSL at the end of that window, and I think that's dangerous to have him involved in the football club yet again. I think it's worrying that Matt Hobbs, who seemed like a good guy. I mean, your namesake as well, Richard. He's a very, very good guy in terms of a footballing sense of things, was replaced by Teti, who's essentially Vitor's puppet, and now Jorge Mendes is back involved. He's worrying.
Yeah, I think it strikes as someone who is only focus is, it sounds like, making money, which isn't always what you need to be doing as a football team. Sometimes it is about just keeping what you have and that being the focus, rather than him going, yeah, but you could make 30 million and I could get you a player for 20 and you'd be up 10. It's like, yeah, but will they be as good as Strand Larsen? Will they be settled in the team? And, not naive to the fact of why Strand Larsen was open to going. And I think almost the fact, he sort of was politely asked to go, and it's been very amicably. It was all kind of above board, I think, in terms of actually, it was contingent on if they sold Isak, if they couldn't get Pro Visa through. But to kind of have effectively a consultant, I think is probably the easiest word to describe Mendes as in the situation. Can't go, don't worry, it can still happen. It can still happen. It's just not productive, and it ultimately it doesn't help our football team.
Yeah,
the only people it helps are Newcastle, because they're getting a proven Premier League player. It helps Strand Larsen because he makes an extra, 2 million a year in wages. It helps out Mendes because he's probably getting, his finder's fee for keeping the plate spinning. But where would Wolves have been left with? And if the answer is that it would have been Tolu Rockader, and that's it, that's fucking. It's awful. It's such bad planning yet again. And like you mentioned Matt Hobbs, he's at Crystal Palace now, and
he's managed to get the Uche deal done because he's respected the footballers' wishes.
Yeah, and Don't get me wrong. I'm sure Matt Hobbs he has probably not got every chance for right in the walls for Wolves. No club can get everyone right, can they? But it's frustrating in a way how we've let Mendes creep back into the picture and not, it's all well and good when you bring in the likes of Ruben Neves, Diogo Jota into your football club and Rui Patricio. If you're not bringing through that level of caliber, then what are you doing? Like, what? It's probably indicative of where Wolves have fallen in his pecking order. That ultimately, instead of us being this really a bridging opportunity for primarily young, talented Portuguese players, we are now just seen as a pit stop for him to make his 10% on whatever. But ultimately, we're not benefiting. I could cope with him, with Wolves bringing in whoever, because at the end of the day, the ends justified the means. In the sense of someone like, Diogo Jota, but actually, and probably the same for Neves, but it didn't quite pan out. But it's like, if you play well here for a couple of years, you'll get a move to the next stage up. Everyone knows it. They work hard. You can see, the players who improve and push themselves to get to that next level, and the ones who angle to go on strike. But you really, you don't hold animosity for that as a football fan. What I do hold begrudging over is players going on strike for it, like Mateus Nunes, and not necessarily fully justifying actions to do that, or people just getting involved and just kind of, the cycle just breaking ultimately.
Yeah, and I think he sort of feels, as when he's involved in the football club, Mendes, that he feels like a snake oil salesman who's involved with the Herbalife Ponzi scheme, to be honest, at this point. That we were sold a dream and we're just getting some shitty fucking knockoff medicine that doesn't work. Maybe that's a great thing. Maybe that's the thing. They can do some Chinese herbal remedies and sell them, because he ain't fucking good at football transfers for this club anymore.
No.
Oh, that was a negative point to end on. But I'll come to you with sort of a prediction for the weekend. Where do you think? Do you think we're gonna? I hate saying the season. I think as AT said in the comment there, I hate thinking the season starts this weekend. But does the season start this weekend in terms of us picking up points?
It kind of needs to. Ultimately, they're right in the comments that it started August 15th, and we need to hit the ground running. We had potentially games we could have got points with, and at the start of the season when the fixture list was drawn out, we should have been aiming to get a draw against Bournemouth. We should have been aiming to get a win against Everton, but we didn't deserve anything out of it. That we definitely didn't deserve anything out of the Bournemouth game, in my opinion, and we arguably maybe deserved a draw out of Everton, but it's kind of not enough. The only plus side is Victor Pereira's teams and his Wolves teams blow hot and cold. We go through patches where we where we go and beaten in 6, and then we can't win in 7. You're hoping that this is just the start of a winning 6 run. Win 6 in a row. And I think there is some really exciting players, and whether we've got all the ingredients to make a really strong team, I kind of doubt it, but I think we've got enough to make things quite interesting.
And I'll push you on a score prediction.
I'm going to go 2-1 Wolves.
I'd love it. I think that'd be fantastic.
I don't know. I think this might just be that game where part of me would really like us to see us get a clean sheet, because I think if we can start doing that a lot more, it's going to make everything a bit easier. But I don't know. Something tells me if we can get Larson fit, we can really stretch them.
Yeah, I'm going with the draw, to be honest. I think I'm at 1-1, 2-2 is a possibility. Hopefully, and we'll be back on, I believe Sunday. We're due to be back, Wolves fans. So for those who do like to watch live on YouTube, I think we'll be back on Sunday evening. For those who are listening on Spotify or wherever you get all your podcast recordings, for listening, and we'll see you for the review show. I mean, in summary, Wolves are going to face an uphill battle against Newcastle. We've got defensive frailties. We've got a lack of attacking cohesion and injury concerns at the wazoo. But let's hope that Jackson Chachua can carry us down that right side with some wonderful pace and improving transitional play to pick up a wonderful result against them Magpies. Come on, you Bobbies. Come on, you Wolves. And see you next time, guys. Thank you very much.
Who would be a Wolves fan, eh?